Hey, it's Russell Graves coming to you from the barn at Hackberry Farm here in Dodge City, Texas. And we're back with another episode of What Makes This Picture Memorable. And so today we're going to go way back in the archive because I don't know about you, but we all, I think, have a moment when things kind of click for us. When all of a sudden, struggling with all the bits of photography, the composition, the shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, trying to make all that make sense. The day comes when it finally kind of makes sense. It's like the whole game slows down for you, and then everything you do starts to sort of click for you at that point. And I mean that click, pun intended. And so today we're going to take a look at a picture that I shot all the way back in my film days. I was probably 25 years old back in about 1995, and this is one of those times. This is maybe the second time for me that really everything sort of clicked for me and all made sense. Before we get started, if you like these videos, be sure to like and subscribe. It sure helps me out a lot and helps me bring you more content like this in the future. So let's dive into this picture. The photo you're looking at here is the product of one of my first magazine assignments I ever got. I was assigned to write an article and take pictures for a story for a magazine here in Texas about Aoudads sheep. And Aoudads sheep are not native to Texas. In fact, they're native to the Atlas Mountains on the northern African continent. And they were imported into Texas back in the 50s as a possible game animal when we didn't do a real good job of managing our own game animals. And so the mule deer and the whitetail numbers were really low. So landowners brought these in to perhaps provide a new source of income by providing something else in which to hunt. And so I was writing a story about all of this and kind of where we might have went wrong with Aoudads sheep introduction and how today they're creating competition against our native mule deer and sort of what can be done about all of that. And so I wrote the story, then it was time to take the pictures. And so I headed out bright early one morning, went to an area where I knew some Aoudads were, and then I set out to just walk around and hopefully do spot and stalk to find these animals. And so I parked and I was on the trail maybe 10-15 minutes. I wasn't even very far from the vehicle, maybe half a mile, maybe even a quarter of a mile. And the sun was just starting to come up. We had enough light in the sky. And all of a sudden I look a little bit to my northeast, and then that's what I saw along the top of the canyons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Aoudads sheep all lined up across the top of that canyon looking back at me. And so at that point, that's when everything kind of clicked for me. I just knew what to do. I knew what the camera settings should be. I knew how to set everything. And then I just knew instinctively how to compose it. Now you got to remember, this was back in the day when this was all on film. And you know, as far as compared to today's cameras, the camera I used then, I think it was probably a Minolta X700 camera, was pretty basic. It would do shutter speed, aperture. The ISO you set manually based on the film speed you had. You couldn't change any of that stuff once you had the ISO in. You're pretty much locked in. I shot this on Fujichrome 100 speed film, and so this was shot at ISO 100, and I had the aperture set where I knew it should be, and then was able to approximate the shutter speed. And so there's a lot of things that were kind of working against me when I shot this picture. But one of the things instinctively I knew when I shot this, and this is a full frame, unedited, this is how it came out of the camera. In fact, you can see the dots on this scan where I haven't even cleaned this scan up of this image. So right when I saw these Aoudads, I was ready to go. And so I'm walking along and I see them on the ridge, and then instantly I look up, frame the picture, shoot 2 or 3 frames, and then they all run away. And so back then, if you've shot film very long, you know it wasn't instant gratification. I had to wait a couple of weeks to get the pictures back, and when I got them back, this is one of about 4 images I shot of the Aoudads, because the motor drive I was using for that camera then shot a blazing 3.5 frames a second. That's how slow it was. And so I didn't get a lot of pictures while they were standing there, but the one picture, the moment it clicked, it all turned out great. And a couple of things I appreciate about this picture is, number one, I don't know that I could have done a better job of composing it. This shot here really turned out nice, as far as, you know, it kind of follows the conventional rule of thirds for the most part. We've got these animals on 2 different planes, so you can't do strictly rule of thirds, but I at least had the presence of mind to put more sky in the picture than I did the foreground, because the foreground would just go dark in this silhouette. And one of the things I really love about it, and this is all serendipity, you can't do much about it, but they were all standing on top of the ridge. So for the most part, I've got perfect silhouettes of all of them when I saw them. And what's really cool about it is I think this sheep to the left, she's looking off, that was mainly kind of to the west. And it's bookended by this one over here on the right doing the same thing. Again, this is serendipity. You couldn't plan it, but there's almost an equal amount of sheep on one side compared to another side. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's an exact number of sheep on both sides, and almost the exact replica in terms of adults versus babies. If you notice on this side, there's 2 little babies with these. There's 2, I would call them half-grown adults maybe over here on this side. And so everything about this kind of just lined up perfectly. The only one bit of non-symmetry we have is, and I think this is right. I think this one here is probably a male, and then I know this one's a male because I can tell by the hair around his neck right here. That's just pretty common in the males. And then the size of his horns are quite a bit bigger than these other ones. So I think this is probably a sub-adult male, and this is probably the dominant male of that group. And so everything about it was just symmetry, and it worked out really great on that. You know how it is when you're taking pictures, you can't plan this stuff. It just works out that way. And so again, as I look back at this picture and think about why it's one of my favorite, all these reasons are why it's my favorite. Now, one thing I didn't intend to do whenever I shot this picture is I was thinking about composition, but I never thought about, what's it going to look like on the page of a magazine. And as it turned out, when they ran this picture, this was the main spread of the magazine. They had the title of the article up here. They had all the words on the sky right there. And as a magazine editorial photographer, you compose a lot like that to try to give the people who lay it all out really a lot of options on how to put text and words on top of your pictures. And so that worked out perfectly. And again, another thing that worked out perfectly is I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and you just can't plan that stuff. After I shot this picture, they all ran away, and then for the rest of the day, and I spent almost all day out there looking for Aoudads, I never saw another one. So I was really lucky in getting this shot here, and it being so iconic, at least in my library, for a long, long time now. One of the things that I always look for when I was doing magazine photography, or when I do magazine photography, is longevity of an image, and this one certainly had longevity. This particular picture, I can't tell you how many times it's been published, but I know this picture has been the double page spread in a bunch of different magazines. They've cropped it even to make it a cover of a couple of different magazines, and so this really is one of those iconic pictures, at least in my own library and in my own mind, for me, that's really one of those pictures that defines my whole career as a nature and wildlife photographer. But other than that, I mean, I can break this thing down. One of the cool things about it is these babies. This is rough country that they live in, and these babies are in 4-wheel drive all the time, and they can keep up with the adults. I could go on and on about just the technical issues about composition, and I nailed the exposure and all that other stuff. But in the end, this is just, to me, just a really, really cool picture that speaks to how rugged a country these animals live in, how, even though they're not from here, they really adapted well to Texas, and how they're just survivors in this land. And that's sort of the story I told in the magazine article. And so forever, when I was thinking about this series, I was thinking about the pictures I wanted to include. This was one of the first pictures I even thought about. And so for me, it's all those things I talked about. Number one, it's the memory that takes me back to when I was young, and that's one of those times when sort of everything clicked for me. And then number two, just to have the presence of mind to take what at least in my library is one of my iconic pictures I've ever taken, and that thing be able to stand up to the test of time. Because for me, this is not only a memorable photo, but it's a good photo, not only for 1995, but also now almost 2025 that we're in it too. So I hope you like this episode of What Makes This Picture Memorable. Join me, we'll have a lot more. And be sure to check out the other content I have here at the Wildlife Photo Show.